Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness podcast. I'm here with co-host Walter Dial, tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors, located here in Bethesda, Maryland. We also have with us today my partner at Ennis Legacy Partners, Corby McGordon. Our mission here on this podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building transferable or sellable business value, and then planning for your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you exit successfully and on your own terms and conditions. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me today. I know you would agree that one of our key value adds to client engagements is identifying and testing their assumptions pertaining to either building a business that's sellable or exiting and how they exit the business eventually. And wrong assumptions can result in an unsuccessful or bad exit. Assumptions about timing, potential owners and buyers, business value, and many other things that we're going to talk about today can result in a bad exit. And we want to help you, listeners, avoid bad exits and enjoy very successful and good exits. And so guys, because owners that we work with and other owners don't know what they don't know, they need help identifying these assumptions and how the assumptions can negatively impact their eventual exit. And that's a big part of our job. So that's our topic today, wrong assumptions resulting in bad exits. And we have with us a regular guest on the podcast and a good friend, John Dini, the president of MPN Incorporated. John's an exit planner, has been for decades. He's an author, he's a speaker, he's a close strategic partner of ours. He's worked with over 500 businesses through his career, which now spans decades. Helping business owners is his passion. Some folks would say he's obsessed with it, starting with his wife. And now he invests much of his time in developing products and fintech kind of things for advisors like us working in the space to use with our clients under his Exit Map brand, which we absolutely subscribe to. And so he's a perfect person to come back and join us for this conversation today about wrong assumptions. John, welcome back. Good to have you.
Thanks. Always a pleasure to be on, Pat.
All right. So, gentlemen, some of the common assumptions we run into would be the amount of income owners expect to need after they exit. Sometimes it's not uncommon that they underestimate that figure. The value. Have you ever met a business owner who thought their business was worth less than what it actually is? The value owners assign to their companies, and then the growth rate that they can predict for the business value and cash flow going forward into the future can be overestimated. Another example of a wrong assumption would be the net proceeds of owners. This comes into your world, Walter. The net proceeds owners expect from the sale of their companies. Walter, you would attest, oftentimes they don't think about taxes, well, or to the degree that they should, and do the tax planning that they should pre-sale. Yeah. So that's kind of things we want to talk about today. John, let's start with you. As our guest, decades in the space, working with owners, what would you say has been the most common, if there's one, wrong assumption you've seen, through your years of working in this space?
Well, all three that you just mentioned, Pat, are obviously happen frequently and are difficult to deal with because business owners put so much of themselves into the company. Their beliefs about valuation and proceeds, are really a very personal thought. But as a coach, I think one of the biggest issues I see is the belief that a certain amount of money will lead to a successful exit. And We see so many owners, and I think a successful exit requires that the owner be happy with his life after he's out of the business or she's out of the business. And so I would say the biggest one that we challenge as coaches is it's not about the money, it's about purpose. And what are they going to do after they're out of the company? So that's an area that we concentrate on quite a bit.
Yeah. So their life plan for life after the business.
Hmm. Yeah, and you say, what are you going to do after the business? Oh, I'm going to play a lot of golf. Well, I can't tell you how many owners have come back to me 6 months later and said, I never thought I could get tired of playing golf, but you know,
Yeah. Well, either they come back to you or their spouse comes back to you and says, "Hey, didn't you didn't you have something to do for this?"
right?
Let's say it's a wife, the spouse's wife. This guy to do after he sold his business?
Yeah, I've heard more than one spouse say, "Honey, I married you for life, but not for lunch every day."
Yeah, well, you know what? That gets easily overlooked. It's one of those soft skill areas, if you will, that I think owners who are used to just numbers and making decisions and everything, there are some assumptions that there's going to be meaning and purpose, the same level of meaning and purpose and significance to life after the business that they've experienced during the business. And then when it's gone, the statistics, and you may have mentioned this just a second ago, John, aren't real good. Whatever it is, 75% or more or 75% or so are miserable within 2 years of exiting because they haven't done what you just said, what you just suggested.
And part of it is physical. And we talk to our owner clients about this. And you've seen me write on it before. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that creates pleasure. It's the neurotransmitter that's triggered when you have a glass of alcohol, when you smoke a cigarette. You trigger dopamine. And things that give you pleasure trigger dopamine. And for business owners, it's making decisions all day. It's being the guy at the top of the heap. It's having people walk in your door. So many business owners say, I wish my employees would think for themselves. And then the employee walks in 3 minutes later and says, boss, what should I do about this? And he says, do that.
That's right.
And the employee walks out and the owner got a little hit of dopamine. Hey, I'm needed. I'm wanted. I'm smart. I'm the guy, and all that goes away like the dropping of a knife when they walk out of the business. And it's like smoking 5 packs of cigarettes a day and then going cold turkey. It's problematic. What are they going to do to get that hit of dopamine? And a lot of times you kid about the wives, but we hear a lot of grief from spouses because they start making decisions around the house. I think you should be doing this, honey, and I think you should be doing that. That doesn't go over real well.
So, John, real quick question then, recognizing that it's not a short process, but what are one or two things that an owner that may be listening could actually start doing to kind of unseat that I'm going to golf every day assumption?
An excellent question, Corby. And an owner I'm meeting later today, I've been working with him on this. And my answer is practice. Practice. As you're preparing to withdraw from the business, and we all encourage people to step back, improve their processes, work with their management team, because a better management team will get you a better price every time, whether you're selling internally or externally. But, the things you think you want to do, the things you think that you want to be involved with, start doing them now.
Yeah.
Find out, devote a day a week to start and say, I'm going to go out, I'm going to work in a community service project, or I'm going to play golf and then work in the afternoon, do a community service project, whatever it is. But start doing that stuff now, not I'm going to work and work and work and work and work, and then one day I'm going to sign the papers, they're going to give me a check, and my life is going to suddenly become what?
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, so
Go ahead, Corey.
I was going to say there's not only value then in having a management team from the buyer's perspective, there's significant value in life after business.
Yes.
Just in being able to adapt.
Yes. You know, you guys know you use some of our tools, and you know that our initial assessment says, when do you want to step back from day to day, and when
Yeah.
do you want to leave entirely? And we all know that if we can get them to where they've stepped back from day to day, that leaving entirely date can slip quite a bit
Exactly.
because the business isn't putting the pressures on them that it was before. And that's when we get them back from the day to day, that we should start replacing that. It's not a day to sleep late and hang around the house. You know, it's a day to be doing the things that you want to do with the rest of your life.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's one wrong assumption that is often made about life after the business. And what we're saying here is have those assumptions tested in a conversation with someone who's skilled to have the conversation with you, and then begin to do what John just said, practice now, put pen to paper, start to think about and put on paper what you're going to be doing after the business. We want to see you have a successful exit, not just financially, but in every way. And this is a key piece to begin planning for and thinking about now. So that's one bad assumption. Walter, let me ask you about, and then John weigh in, the net proceeds owners expect from the sale of their companies, wrong assumption that I mentioned at the beginning. What kind of what would you say in regard to that?
Well, I think we kind of have a compounding problem because a lot of owners start off believing their business is worth more than it is to start. So they're working with a gross number that's too high. Then they forget the fact that they're probably going to lose at least 30% to taxes. And then, there's costs associated with the exit. They have professional fees and things like that. There's working capital they need to leave in the business, for the new owner. So a lot of times they're starting with a gross number that's not realistic. And then they really haven't thought about the fact that the net number is going to be at least 30% less, probably 40% less. And that's a huge amount of money for a lot of these transactions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, John, would you have anything to add to what Walter just said?
Certainly, and the hearsay evidence doesn't take any of that into consideration. If you ask another owner at a conference or a trade show, or you ask an intermediary, oh, I hear you sold Walter's company. How much did he get? They don't tell you how much he paid in taxes and how much was in retirement of debt service and how much had to be tangible net equity lived in the. They said he got $5 million. And you're like, oh, well, I know my company's bigger than him. I must be worth $7 million.
Right.
Because it's an ego. It's an ego for any seller to use the highest number he possibly can. So owners are constantly getting fed this erroneous information about how much other companies are worth.
Yep. No, that's right.
I mean, Pat, I've told you the story before. My client who was it was a really bad situation. He inherited the company from his father who did no planning. And the father just left the business to his 4 kids equally, even though only one was involved in the business. The one who was involved in it was being driven insane by the other 3, to the point where he called me up one day and said, great news, I've sold my business for $2 million. It wasn't a real big business. And I'm like, can you send me the details?
Yeah.
And basically he quote unquote sold his business for $2 million. And fortunately he hadn't signed it. And he was leaving in the business 1.2 million in receivables and 800 in cash. I said, you realize you just sold your business for 0, right?
Wait a minute, I want to buy that business. Let me get online for that one.
It's, gosh, we laugh, but it's kind of a sad story,
It
isn't
is.
it? Okay, so then, Walter, one of the things I think we do in regard to the tax planning piece is say, look, even if you just understand the difference between an asset sale and a stock sale, taxation there, and then maybe have either your exit planning advisor or your CPA in conjunction with your CPA go through an exercise with tax form 8594 just to help them understand how the assets of the business are going to be categorized from a tax perspective. I mean, if they do nothing more than that, is that good advice, do you think, or other things come to mind?
I think that's good advice. I mean, a lot of our clients, they're going to end up having to do an asset sale. And fortunately, the largest asset for most of our businesses is goodwill, which is capital gain. But it's definitely worth doing the exercise. And we do have some businesses that we've sold that are more capital intensive, like we've had, some blue collar type businesses where the asset allocation did have a dramatic impact on the tax allocation.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's definitely a good minimum exercise. But I think, one of the things we can do when we meet with business owners is just right off the bat, plant the seed, keep in mind, you're only going to walk away with net. So whatever you think your gross is, think in terms of 60 to 70% of that is what you're walking away with.
Yeah, Walter, you mentioned that the assumption is a compounding problem in that there's an assumption often of a starting point, X million dollars that may be pulled out of the air. And the truth is, when we're looking out, say 5 to 7 years, we have to make assumptions. Evaluation could cost 10 grand or more. How would you advise, both you, John, Pat, how would you advise an owner then to validate an assumption so there's a realism to it, even though you are indeed forecasting the future?
Well, I think we've talked to other people just on this podcast fairly recently, and they were talking about how for a lot of the businesses that are in the range that we deal with, the 1 to 15 million revenue type businesses, they're generally selling for 3 to 5 times EBITDA. Mm-hmm. So even if you don't want to go through all the, a big valuation or whatever, although I think the product that we offer, which is just a very reasonably priced estimate of value, is something every business owner should definitely do. But if they're not willing to do that, they could kind of, sit down and say, okay, if my business has some issues, maybe I'm worth 3 times EBITDA. If it's state of the art, maybe I'm worth 5 times, just to give them a ballpark. But then they got to realize that, that's gross. That's not net.
Yeah.
But, they definitely, we always push this. The estimate of value really, in my opinion, is a 100% necessary first step.
Got it. Yeah. And at a minimum, then what I hear you saying is understand what EBITDA actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's talk about this other wrong assumption I mentioned, and then maybe we can lob a couple of others in before we wrap up. The growth rate that owners often predict for the business value and cash flow they can wrongly assume that it's going to, or overestimate it. John, do you have any thoughts on that? And Corby, I want to get you to weigh in because you do a lot of that work for us.
Well, you hit a painful point for me, Pat, because it's one of my pet peeves. There is an outfit with a lot of PR that holds seminars in hotels for business owners, and they use the growth rate for net present value assumptions. And they say, well, just assume your company will grow by 15% a year for the next 15 years. Let's take the net present value of that, and that's what you should be selling your company for. And
wow,
the growth rate, when I have clients tell me, well, I'm going to have this growth rate, we'll predict it or we'll factor it in for as long as they're going to own the company. And I say, you understand that no buyer is going to pay you for the growth that happens after you sell the company. They're not really going to monetize that for you. It's the same thing with the owners who've let the company slide. And I know you guys have heard this. Well, I want X because my company used to do a lot more. And if some young guy comes in with a lot of ambition, he can build it up to that again. So I want him to pay me for what my company used to be. So growth rates are really, if they can't prove it in the last 3 years, And especially with COVID, I did so much more before COVID. Fine. Most of the industries I know that are not hospitality or office furniture have recovered from COVID. If you haven't, let's not talk about your growth rate prior to COVID. So if your growth rate is a provable factor, fine. But if your growth rate is a wish, then we can't factor it into what your company's going to be worth.
All right, Corb, would you have anything to add to what John said?
Yeah, I sure agree with that, John. I forecast growth rates for companies all the time, and it's got to be based in reality. And history is not determinative, but it is informative. And if it's been X and you assume X plus some factor, the question any reasonable analyst would ask is, well, why would that be? And then the fact of the matter is, growing 15% on 2 million is very different than growing 15% on 10 million. Just the fact is, the bigger you grow, growth rates slow just because of sheer mass. And so, yeah, the assumptions have to be based in some objective fact of understanding of market, understanding of history, and then even assuming, okay, best case, worst case. And from a planning perspective, I much prefer they plan for worst case, because then they're not going to be disappointed. More is a pleasant surprise.
And Corby, one of the things you're really good at is, because I think a lot of owners don't think of this, but even growing, at a fairly moderate rate, at some point you got to realize your current infrastructure isn't going to be able to support that. Exactly. And you're really great at building in the variable costs that go with that growth, which is, I think something a lot of owners kind of forget about.
Yeah. I was talking to a client a while ago, and the fact of the matter is they have grown a certain amount. They're assuming a continuation of that growth, but the magnitude is such that they really need sales support, because they are the owners are the salespeople, and they don't actually believe that. So from a analytical perspective, it's just, well, the forecast doesn't have credibility, because capacity of the owners to sell at some point will just be hit. And,
Well, and the converse to that is when an owner tells me, I've got the team and the infrastructure to do 50% more business without adding anything. And the answer to that is, so how do you justify losing that much profit?
You're not supposed to answer those questions, John.
Sorry,
Okay,
that's what I do.
Hey guys, we have a few minutes left, and there's one more assumption that I want to lob out as the last one we talk about today. And we could have a series of podcasts just talking about these assumptions that owners make. And gosh, it's easy to understand, right? I mean, you just don't know what you don't know. And boy, that's true for me in so many areas of life. It's hard for me to count how many areas of life where there's just things I don't know what I don't know. So it's understandable, and it's our job just to help them understand that there are assumptions that need to be identified and then tested, and then help them test it and put the right practices in place. Here's the last one. Let's talk about this, because boy, this is a big one, I think. How long it takes to actually plan a successful exit, no matter which route they choose, be it third party, sale to insiders, transfer to kids, ESOP, whatever. Boy, sometimes it does seem like the owner has an assumption that it's just we'll get it done in a few months. It's just going to take some, we'll get a few things together and then get at a deal table and sign some forms, and check will come across the table or a wire into my bank account, and we're done. John, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I tell owners that there's an inverse curve between time and the security of their money. I say, if you want to get out of your business tomorrow, I can get you out of your business tomorrow. You're going to take 100% note from your employees, and you'll be at risk for every penny of it. Mm-hmm. The longer you have, the less risk there's going to be involved. You give me 10 years, I can guarantee you walk away with all your money.
Hmm.
Anything in between there, you're going to have to make decisions about how much risk you want to take.
Boy, that's excellent. That's very concise and dramatic, but true. Um, it paints a clear picture, and I don't know if I've heard it put more clearly and in a more compelling
Yeah.
way than that. Um,
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I don't know if I'm going to say anything on the heels of that. But Corby and Walter, Mike, what would you, anything you guys want to say?
Yeah,
I think
I think, John, you hit. Go
Yeah,
ahead, Walter.
I was just gonna say, I think that's really concise, and pretty much everything we do, or a lot of what we do in the whole exit planning process, is all about reducing the business owner's risk in all different aspects. And I think that's a great way to put it. If you're going to try to rush it, you're adding risk to the whole process.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're not maximizing value. We want to maximize value in most cases, and you're not going to maximize value, and you're going to, well, you'll maximize risk and minimize value.
Right.
Kind of the opposite of what we really want to help them do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very concise analogy that, from our personal wealth planning, even, you have a portfolio, and, in a sense, eliminating risk is like adding something to your portfolio, which increases the potential value. And so it really takes that whole list of value drivers, value creation, and just breaks it down into the bite-sized chunks of, over 10 years, boy, you can keep adding to your portfolio value that will yield a result. So I love it.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap up here in a second. All of that's very true, and I know you guys would agree with me, though. The owner's goals are foundational to all of this. So their financial goals, their values-based goals, even their legacy goals are foundational. So if they're clear on their goals and have conviction about their goals, and selling the business tomorrow with 100% notes to the employees aligns with what they want to do and how they want to do it, then okay, good. Let's just make it happen. So what's critical and foundational, listeners, is really being clear on what you want financially, from a values-based and legacy perspective, and then making the right decisions accordingly. Well, John, it's been fantastic to have you with us again. It's always great to have you part of the conversation. Is there well, two things. First off, any last thoughts about anything when we talked today? And then, is there anything that you'd like to promote today? We always ask the guests if there's anything you want to promote.
Well, I think last thoughts is just, and it goes to the last topic. Be prepared to take your time. Anything worthwhile takes time. There is no quick. There is nobody hovering out there waiting for your listing to go up on the internet so they can write you your retirement check. The actual hit rate of the business broker community is about 20% of their listings, and it's been that rate for the last 20 years. So, you're fighting the odds, but fortunately for you, most of the people that you're fighting or competing against are not prepared. So if you're prepared, if you've gone through a process, your odds of being in the top 20% are much greater. And as far as promotion goes, you mentioned the exit map tools that you and other advisors use, Pat and Corby. You're listed, the directory is on your exit map with your listing, and there's also a bunch of free tools up there that an owner can fool around with. And if he's worried about value, he's looking at timing, or he's looking at what does EBITDA and seller's discretionary earnings mean, he can play with a couple of tools on there, and there's a lot of educational information up there too. So yourexitmap.com.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. Thanks for joining us. Actually, if someone wanted to contact you for some reason or another after listening today, how would they do that?
Dini at mpninc.com or jdini, DINI, at exitmap.com. Either one of those will get to me.
Excellent. Thanks again. It's fun to have you on. And listeners, if you'd like to reach out to either Walter or me regarding the building the value of your business or planning your exit, you can reach Walter at 301-951-9090, or me and Corby here at 301-859-0860. You can also access resources at grfcpa.com, ennislp.com, and exitreadiness.com. And actually, if you establish an account for online resources at exitreadiness.com and use the coupon code podcast when you make a purchase, you'll receive a 10% discount on whatever it is you're buying. So thank you again. Until next time on the Exit Readiness podcast, this is Pat Ennis and Walter Dials signing off.